Hello and welcome to Puffin Virtually Live. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Lucy Mangan, columnist for The Guardian newspaper and for Stylist magazine, and all-round mega book fan. It's my privilege to host today's event with award-winning author Michelle Paver, who's going to tell us all about her fantastic new adventure series set in the Mediterranean Bronze Age called Gods and Warriors. Michelle is, of course, the best-selling author of the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series set in the Stone Age, which has sold over 2.5 million copies worldwide and is published in over 35 countries. We're talking to you live from Sadler's Wells Theatre in London, and we're joined by pupils from the local schools. And of course, by you, our online viewers from across the globe. So a big warm welcome to all of you watching out there. I'm going to hand over to Michelle in just a moment, but I wanted to remind you that you can send in your questions for Michelle throughout the course of the event via the Puffin Virtually Live website, which is appearing on your screen now. Michelle will aim to answer as many of them as possible in the time we have towards the end of the event. And at the end of the webcast, we'll let you know which lucky school watching live online has won 30 copies of Gods and Warriors. But without further ado, please give a big welcome to Michelle Paver.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. And as Lucy said, I'm going to tell you about how I came to write Gods and Warriors. And for the first book, that involved swimming with dolphins. But first, as Lucy said, the first series I wrote about the Stone Age, the Wolf Brother books, were set in the Stone Age, 6,000 years ago. And for Gods and Warriors, I've gone a little bit later, about 3,500 years ago, to the Bronze Age, and we're in ancient Greece. But this was a wild world of mountains full of bears and wolves and lions. The poorest people hunted and gathered wild food. That's my hero, Hylas. But whether you were a hunter-gatherer or a warrior or a priestess or a slave, your life was pretty uncertain. You never knew whether a ship was going to sink, a storm was going to sink your ship, or an earthquake was going to flatten your hut. So you were always looking out for omens, for signs from the spirit world. Is that hawk circling above you? Is that just a bird, or is it a message from the gods? So that's the world of Gods and Warriors. But what about the story? Well, as I said, Hylas, the hero, he's the lowest of the low. He's very poor. He's a goat herd. He has to look after someone else's goats. And he's 12 years old, and he's growing up in the mountains with his dog and his little sister. But one day something happens which is going to change his life forever. His camp is attacked by mysterious warriors in black leather armor. His dog is killed. His sister goes missing. Hylas is on the run. The warriors want him dead, but he doesn't know why. But when he's on the run, he makes two friends. He makes friends with a girl called Pyrrha. Now, Pyrrha is also 12, but she's very different from Hylas because she's unimaginably rich. She's the daughter of the high priestess. But she spent her whole life cooped up in the house of the goddess, so she's desperate to be free, which is why she's run away. And he also makes friends with a dolphin, whom he calls Spirit. And Spirit is one of 3 wild animals that are going to weave in and out of the series. It's 5 books in all, and they're going to become friends with Hylas and Pyrrha. And just like in Wolf Brother, I told part of the story from the wolf's point of view. In the first book, which is also called Gods and Warriors, like the series, I tell parts of the story from Spirit's point of view, the dolphin's point of view. So there's 3 wild animals. There's a dolphin, a lion, and a falcon. And when you think about it, if you're a child in the Bronze Age and you're in trouble, those are good friends to have, because the dolphin is the cleverest creature, the falcon is the fastest, and the lion is the strongest creature in your world. So just to give you a little flavour of the story, I'm going to read you a bit. And this is a bit from when Hylas is on the run, and he's adrift in a small boat on the sea, no sign of land anywhere. He's made himself a kind of spear by strapping a bronze knife that he stole to an oar. And he's killed a turtle, and he's eaten it raw, and he's scraped out the shell and put it on his head to keep the sun off. But something's just risen up from the sea, and it's not a dolphin, it's a shark. Something bumped against the boat just hard enough to make it rock. Hylas rearranged his clammy hands on the spear. Lazily the shark lashed its tail and swam away. Hylas saw the ripple of its gills and its grey fin scything the waves. With alarming speed it turned and came at him again. Bracing his legs, he readied his spear. The shark swam closer. Hylas drew back the spear and jabbed at its head. The shark twitched, nearly wrenching the weapon from his hands. He yanked it free with a jerk that almost flung him overboard and sent his turtle-shell cap flying. The shark swam under the boat and seized the shell in its jaws, thrashing its great head from side to side. It savaged the shell, crushing it as easily as if it had been birch bark. Then it dived, leaving a scattering of shards drifting on the foam. Streaming with sweat, Hylas lowered the spear. He could still feel the awesome power as the shark had wrenched itself free of the spear, but in the water he saw no tinge of red. He hadn't even drawn blood. No knife, not even the bronze dagger, could kill such a monster. And it would be back. Well now, as you can tell, when I'm writing a story, I like to make it as real as possible. I want you, the reader, to feel that you're actually living the adventure with Hylas and Pyrrha. I want it to be the most stonkingly exciting story you've ever read. And to do that, I try to do as much as I can of what the characters are going to do. So for the Wolf Brother books, I swam with wild killer whales and ate some weird Stone Age food, and I made friends with wolves. And I'm trying to do the same sort of thing for Gods and Warriors. So to find out what it was like for Hylas, I went to the Greek mountains, and I realized that because he's poor and he hasn't got any parents to look after him, he's got to be really tough. And he's got to hunt and gather wild food, a bit like Torak did in the Stone Age, in the Wolf Brother books. So when Hylas wants to make a bit of rope to make a snare to catch an animal, he has to do that from just what's around him in the forest. So he'll use some of this, perhaps. This is a bit I made. This is a bit of nettle string. This is from the stems of stinging nettles. That's really easy to make. Hylas knows how to do it. Maybe he wants to dig up some roots or make some fish hooks. He'll use a bit of this. This is antler from a deer. It's really heavy and hard, and he knows where to find it because he knows the forest. He's not going to get very far without an axe. But of course, Hylas is poor, so he can't afford bronze. So he's going to do like Torak did in Wolf Brother in the Stone Age. He's going to use flint. And this is actually a real Stone Age flint axe head. Would have been mounted on a stick. And Hylas knows how to cut it and make it nice and sharp. But when he kills an animal, and of course he does have to, I don't think there were too many vegetarians in those days, he doesn't want to anger the gods or indeed the spirit of the animal, so he has to do it respectfully, and it's very important that he has to use all the bits of the animal, otherwise its spirit might be angry and then he might not kill any more. So, just to show you what I mean, say he kills a hare like this one. He's going to use all the bits of the animal. He'll skin it, and he'll use the skin to make clothes, perhaps. Can anyone here, perhaps in the theatre audience, hold up a hand and suggest another body part? Yes, right at the back, you'll have to... Brain? The brain is a nice one, thank you. The brain of the animal, rather like our brain, is a bit like plain yoghurt. Nice and mushy and fatty. And what they'll do, what Hylas will do, is he'll use it on the non-furry side of the hair, of the skin rather, and that turns it into leather. If you rub the brain into the skin, that turns it into leather. So that's a really, really nice way of using the animal. Any other body part? Yes? The teeth, that's a nice one. Well, hares have quite sharp teeth. Probably, if it's a bigger animal, you might leave the teeth in the jaw, and you've got a nice knife. Otherwise, you might use them as decoration. And you can probably see this necklace here. This is a bear's tooth and claws, so they're definitely a light decoration. Yes, another one. The liver, that's nice and rich, and you would eat it. And in fact, actually, when I was doing some research up in Greenland, I ate some raw seal liver, not endangered seals. These were plentiful seals. The whole animal was being eaten. And it's quite nice, actually. It slips down quite easily. We'll have one more question. Yes?
Stomach.
The skull. The stomach, nice one, you've gone inside the animal. Yes, they definitely use the stomach. They'd wash it out, this is a small animal, so again they'd turn it into leather, and then use it as a little pouch, maybe for holding possessions or good luck charms. Now we could go on, but that gives you the idea that Hylas uses all the parts of the animal because he doesn't want to be disrespectful to it. Now, that's Hylas. What about Pyrrha? Now, I said she's immensely rich, and so she's used to things that Hylas has never actually seen, things like, I don't know, stone houses and stairs and a bath. And she belongs to the Minoan civilization. There's lots of information about them, but if I just described and looked it up in books and then described it, it would slow down the story and make it boring. So instead, what I try to do is I use just the most exciting, interesting bits, and I weave them into the story. And to show you how I do that, we made a little film when I went to one of my favourite places in London. I'm here at the British Museum, which I've been coming to since I was 5 years old. And I want to show you some everyday objects from Hylas and Pyrrha's time, and some not so everyday ones. And I'll tell you how they work their way into the story. I told you about Hylas and Pyrrha making offerings to the gods. Well, here are some from their time. If you can see this little pottery leg, if you had a dodgy leg maybe, you'd make one of these and leave it in the shrine and ask the gods to heal you. Over here we've got some little animals. Here's some bronze bulls, and here are some pottery animals. Maybe you'd make some of those to keep your livestock safe. Maybe you could make some in the classroom. Pyrrha finds some offerings when she's hiding out in a cave. Here and there she glimpsed lesser offerings pushed into cracks and crevices. A tiny earthenware bull, a bird, a snake. On Keftu, people did the same thing, journeying to sanctuaries on peaks and in caves to leave the first fruits of the harvest and little wild creatures of clay or bronze. Well, some things it's pretty obvious what they are. That's a giant jar which would have held grain or maybe wine. But other things, it's not so easy to tell what they are. Over here, we've got something that looks like a bathtub and a chest, maybe for holding clothes. No, these held dead bodies. They're coffins. So here's something that Pyrrha's very familiar with, but Hylas hasn't seen ever until he meets her, and that's gold. This is Minoan jewellery, just the kind that Pyrrha would wear, bracelets, necklaces. Minoans were the only people who pierced their ears for earrings. And down here, you can see these round things, they all almost look like flowers. Those are spangles that they'd sew on their dresses and their tunics. And Pyrrha's, though, are a little bit cooler than this, because hers are tiny gold axes. Finally, there are some objects that just have so much power that they shout out to be important in the story. Here's a bronze dagger, very much like the one Hylas finds in mysterious circumstances, and it's going to be vital to the whole series of Gods and Warriors. It was made of bronze, very plain and unadorned. It had broad square shoulders and 3 smooth rivets on the hilt. A tapered blade twice the length of Hylas's hand, with a strong straight spine sweeping down to a lethal point. The edges gleamed faintly red in the morning light. He had never seen anything so beautiful. Welcome back. So that's a little about Hylas and Pyrrha, but of course Spirit the dolphin is an important character in the story. So what's it like to be a dolphin? Well, I had to meet some to find out. First of all, I met a tame dolphin in Florida, and the first thing that struck me when I was up close was how strange they are, because this is a bottlenose dolphin, big smile on his face. Of course, he's not smiling. That's just the way his mouth is made. A dolphin could be dying, and he'd still have that strange smile. And they're incredibly strong. I stroked this dolphin. He felt like marble, smooth and solid, very, very hard, because they're really strong. A dolphin can kill a shark. They don't use their teeth. They just bash into it with their nose and give the shark internal injuries. And this dolphin started talking to me. He opened his mouth and went, "Ai, ai, ai," something like that. I didn't know what he was saying, But the really strange thing was that the sound was coming out of his blowhole, the hole on the top of his head. So for me, it was like meeting a really friendly, clever, beautiful alien from another world. And of course, in a sense, that's what he is, because spirit comes from the ocean. So I knew I had to meet wild dolphins, so I went to the Atlantic and I swam with some. And at first I couldn't see them because they were quite a long way away, but I had my snorkel and my goggles, and when I put my head under the water, I realized that dolphins live in a world of sound, because you can't see very far in the ocean, so spirit has to make sounds to communicate. And each dolphin has its own name whistle, but mostly spirit makes little clicking sounds, and then the clicks bounce off a person or a rock or a fish, back onto spirit's head, and then he turns them into pictures, sound pictures, in his head. So it's kind of strange, and as soon as I had my head underwater, I realized this. But then suddenly, one of the dolphins had obviously picked me up on his echolocation, and he swam past me, very close, to check me out. And just for a moment, our eyes met. And it's quite a strange feeling when a wild, clever animal meets your eye. And then he sank back into his beautiful blue world. And I really wanted to go with him, but I knew I couldn't. And I've tried to put some of that feeling into the friendship between Hylas and Spirit, the dolphin. So you can see why in ancient Greece, dolphins were sacred. And if you killed a dolphin, you were killed. So I thought I'd just read you a little bit from Spirit's point of view to show you how I've used that research. And this is a bit right at the beginning when we first meeting Spirit. And he's just left his pod, his family, because he has a feeling as he's swimming through the sea that there's something he needs to do. So he's searching from the surface down into the deep. He left the restless clamour of the edge and dived down into the beautiful blue deep, where the light was soft and cool, and he could hear himself click. He caught the suck and slither of an octopus and was tempted to go after it, as octopus were his favourite prey, and he enjoyed nosing them out of their holes. But the feeling of something he had to do stuck like a barnacle and wouldn't let go. As he swam deeper, the sea grew darker and colder. He clicked faster, listening to the craggy rocks crusted with coral. Mullets fled from him in panic, and groupers grunted warnings to each other. He ignored them. Down he swam, clicking faster and faster till he reached the black beneath, where he couldn't see at all, but he could hear the peaks and valleys and the blind creatures moving in the dark. Here the sea surged heavy and slow, which was a relief after the crashing, uneasy edge. But whatever he was supposed to find, it wasn't here either. Well, as I mentioned, Spirit isn't the only animal that Hylas and Pyrrha are going to be friends with. In book 2, they meet a lion cub. I'm writing that right now. And in book 3, they meet a falcon. Now, writing from the points of view of different animals is one of my favourite things about writing these stories, because partly that's because I get to meet the animals. So here's a little film about what happened when I started to get my first impressions of a falcon. School of Falconry, to start to get a feel for what it's like to be a falcon. And that's why, on my wrist, I've got a peregrine falcon who rejoices in the not very Bronze Age sounding name of Eki Thump. And with me to help me get to know him is the falconer, Sarah. Sarah, hello, and thank you very much for letting me hold Eki Thump. So Sarah, his beard is sort of fluffing out a bit. Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. If you just look underneath his beak there, you've got those lovely cream feathers that are just starting to fluff up a little bit.
Yes.
That's a clear sign that he is starting to relax down with you a little bit when we're manning a falcon and we see that beard come out for the first time, because you do feel like, you know, you are building a bit of a relationship and they are relaxing down.
So we're now out in the open, in a field, and this is a different falcon. She's a female called Coast. And Sarah, I think you're going to give us some exercise.
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to send her off into the skies and I'm going to hold her up and I'm going to allow her to have a rouse, which is where she'll shake her feathers down. And it's really like a pre-flight check. It allows her to slice through the air more cleanly. She doesn't want the rouse. She's off.
I'm going to move back and let you do your stuff.
Okay, Michelle. Coasty's just enjoying herself at the moment. She's having a little bit of free time, exercising, stretching her wings. In a moment, I'm going to produce this swing lure. So every time she misses this lure, she will come in for another attack, just like that. So I'm going to get ready to call her in. We do it with a signal, which is your voice, and we shout the word ho. She will have heard that, in she'll come, and as falcons do, they catch their prey in the air.
And what is it? Looks like I can see a foot there, so it's a chick, is it? Or?
It's a day-old cockerel.
Okay.
They'd all come in frozen.
And she needs, am I right that she needs the feathers as well as the
Absolutely,
meat?
they must have a whole carcass diet. Yeah. And anything that's undigestible, such as the bone or the fur or the feather, is actually separated within the stomach and formed into what we call a cast, which is a pellet. Yeah. And that cleans out the inside of her stomach and gets rid of any undigestible fats or acids that might be in there.
Well, thank you, Coast. That was amazing. Thanks, Sarah. Well, falcons are going to take a starring role in Book 3 of Gods and Warriors, but in Books 1 and 2 they also sort of fly in and out. So I think I'm going to be coming here quite a few more times to get to know them. Welcome back. Well, talking about animals, you may remember that I asked a question on the Virtually Live website about animal guides. I asked if you were in a dangerous situation, which animal would you choose as your animal helper and why? So now I thought I'd read out some of your ideas. Well, Megan, aged 9, said she would choose a horse because I would be able to ride on its back quickly away from danger. Good point. Reese, aged 12, would choose a bat. He said, as it would help guide me at night time or in dark caves and tunnels using its echolocation. Echolocation, just like dolphins. Melanie sent in her choice through Twitter, and she said, I would have a lizard, original choice, because I have a pet bearded dragon. And Adam, aged 11, said, I would choose a bear in a time of danger, because they are fluffy and cuddly for keeping me warm in the cold night, strong and fearsome to scare off other creatures, and able to carry me on his back when I tire. Adam had lots of other reasons as well, but that's all we've got time for. Well, thank you very much for all of your messages and suggestions. I really enjoyed reading them. And let's welcome Lucy back, because now I get to answer some questions, I think.
You do indeed. Thank you very much, Michelle. It's time to answer some of the brilliant questions you've been sending in now. So I've got one here from, let's find out. From Anne Tudor at Godolphin Junior School. And she says, do you think it's more important to write ideas using your own experiences or research, or to write with ideas from your imagination?
Oh, that's an interesting one. And I think it's both, really. I mean, I've been giving you examples of, where I've done research and I've actually met falcons and dolphins and things. And that really is useful because it gives you ideas. But obviously, I do also have to use my imagination a lot. And ultimately, I can't be a dolphin. I have to imagine it. And there are places and things I can't do. There's an earthquake in book 1, and I couldn't experience that. So, yes, of course, you have to use your imagination as well. So I don't think it's more important. I think it's a bit of one and a bit of the other. Good question.
It's Alvin from St Martha's asks, what was your favourite book growing up?
My favourite book growing up, when I was very small, it was the Moomin books. I don't know if anyone's read the Moomin books. They're like these small, fluffy, quite thoughtful creatures who live in Finland. When I was a bit older, I loved books about wild animals, and I also loved the myths of ancient Greece and ancient Egypt and the Viking myths. I think because myths are like more grown-up fairy stories. They're quite violent, they're quite strange, and you never know what's going to happen next.
I think we'll take one from the audience now. So hands up and shout out your question.
What inspired you to write the book?
What inspired me to write the book? That's always a really difficult question because basically the idea comes first. You just think, I had an image in my mind of Hylas. I didn't know his name yet. I just saw a boy sitting in a boat adrift on the sea. And so the bit I read you is actually the first part of the idea for the story. Now, why did I have that idea? I knew it was hot. I knew it was in the Mediterranean somewhere. The why bit comes afterwards when you've written the book, and it's probably because, as I said, I loved reading about the myths of ancient Greece when I was a kid. So when you write, you want to sort of make things happen that you can't in real life. And I wanted to live in the ancient Greek world and have, you know, wild animals as my friends. So I get to do it by writing Gods and Warriors.
Let's have another question from the audience, whoever we can reach
Can you
first.
decide the experiments of writing a book?
Can I describe the experience of writing a book?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. You start off with page 1 and you plan, first of all. This is how I do it. I think of the story, I plan it first, because otherwise I can go very wrong if I just start writing. I do some research, and then comes the awful time when I've got a blank page and I have to sit there and try to think how to tell the story, and that's really hard. So I write it out, and then I cross it out, and I start again, and I do that a lot of times. And eventually, I get to the point where I've got something that I'm pleased with. But that process of rewriting, of crossing out the boring bits, of making the description clearer and more exciting, takes a long time. So I rewrite these stories maybe 30 or 40 times to get them just right, which is why it takes me about a year to write the book, and it may take you a couple of days to read it. But there's an old saying when you're writing that easy reading is very hard writing, and that's true. So I hope I haven't been too discouraging to anybody who's keen on writing. It is really fun, though, I should say that. The best bits are when the story comes alive. You're writing a bit and suddenly you feel as if you can actually see Hylas and Pyrrha and the dolphin. They're right with you, and that's why I do it, for those moments.
I think it's more encouraging when you know how long it takes you, because you can feel quite daunted when you sit down at your own blank page and you think, oh,
Yes.
this writer, she just typed out this whole book just from her brain, because that's all you see at the end.
There are some awful writers who do that, and I hate them.
We won't
I hate
talk
them.
about that.
No.
But I've got a question here from Irene at Tolworth Girls' School, which is a bit related to that. She says, do you have a special place to write, and how many words do you try to write each day?
I have a special place to write. My study, I moved to a new house on Wimbledon Common, and so I like to be overlooking the woods, so all I can see is trees, and my desk is covered with bits of antler, like the one I showed you, and the Stone Age axe, and various other little things. And that helps me to write the story. I'm not very good at writing on trains and in hotels and things, although sometimes I have to. I don't actually count the number of words I do every day. Many writers do. I count the hours. So I try to do about 6 hours a day, but sometimes I do less than that, because I get lots of phone calls and things. And sometimes I do a bit more as my deadline approaches and I'm about to miss it. But that's a reason why, and this may be shocking to many of you, because you've grown up with the internet, but I don't actually have the internet at home, and I don't use it. It doesn't help me for my research, and I find there's too many distractions. If I had email, I'd get too many people, overseas publishers and things, asking me questions. So I like to keep, I don't even have my mobile phone in my study. It lives downstairs. So I'd like to keep it nice and uninterrupted.
That is very disciplined. We were saying, I was talking to you earlier, and I don't know if you know, but Michelle was a lawyer. Do you think is there some kind of legal training that's carried over into your writing, do you think?
Probably the keeping of deadlines and marking down how many hours you spend is probably a hangover from being a lawyer. But I don't want to put off anyone who wants to be a lawyer, but I do find writing about dolphins much more fun, I have to say.
We've got a question here from Seamus in Dublin, who just asks, what's the most dangerous situation you've been in on your travels?
The most dangerous situation, without a doubt, was my encounter with something that would have killed and eaten me if it had got too close. I was in Greenland, southern Greenland in the summer, researching the Torak books, and there were supposed to be no polar bears in that region, so I went for a walk 2 hours out of the little settlement where I was, all on my own. I see a polar bear in the distance, unmistakably, quite a long way away, standing up, sniffing the air. And I've never been so scared, because polar bears eat people. You can't persuade them not to. Now, what saved me was the wind, because it was blowing in my face, and I realised that that meant it was blowing my scent away from the polar bear. So I turned around and I walked. I didn't run because I thought just in case it sees me. I walked very quickly back to the settlement, hoping that the wind would stay blowing my scent away from the polar bear so it wouldn't smell me. And luckily it didn't, so it wandered off. But that was the most scary experience I've ever had. I never want to have another one of those. And I can still remember every stone in the path as I walked back to the settlement.
I think I would too.
Yeah,
Good grief.
yeah.
All right, let's have another question from the audience, shall we?
If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Ah, one person. My goodness. If I could have dinner with one person, dead or alive. That's a really hard question. I'm assuming, yes, it can't be a fictional person because they've got to be either dead or alive. So, yeah. I think maybe Charles Darwin, actually. That's going to sound a bit sort of worthy, but I really admire him. And he was so interested in animals. I think it would be, and he spent all his life really studying hard, and he was interested right up to the last moment before he died. And I'd love to get some of that enthusiasm and hear his views on how animals experience life. So yeah, I'll probably think of lots of others after this is over, but what a great question.
Thank you. Can we have another one, please?
If you weren't an author, what would you be instead?
If I wasn't an author, I'd be miserable. I don't know what else I'd be. You don't really choose to be an author. Mostly it's kind of like a compulsion. You just want to, you have to be, and you're not very happy when you haven't been writing. I mean, I haven't been writing for quite a few weeks now because I've been travelling to different countries to talk about my books, and I'm beginning to get a bit scratchy. So tomorrow I'm going to go back to book 2 of Gods and Warriors, which is called The Burning Shadow, and I'm really looking forward to picking up the story and getting back to meeting the wolf cub, the lion cub, I should say.
Here's a question from Claire in Palmer's Green. She says, where would you most like to go on a research trip to that you haven't already been?
Ah, that's interesting. I've never been asked that. That I haven't already been. There are parts of Egypt that I haven't already been to, that I'm hoping to go to, because in book 4 of Gods and Warriors, Hylas and Pyrrha reach ancient Egypt. And I'd love to go to the Oasis region and the desert, that's to the west of the Nile. I've been to the Nile many times in the Valley of the Kings. So I'd love to go there, and I'd love to go also much further south to the sort of the rapids and where the Nile flows much more fast, and that's called Aswan. And there's somewhere called Crocodile Island, which I'd love to visit.
Haven't had enough of polar bears. You want to go and visit crocodiles as well?
Somewhere, yes.
Okay.
Crocodiles, yeah. They'll be important in the story, so, yeah.
By the sounds of things, you don't just plan out one book in advance. You've got the whole series planned. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, it's very important to me to know that I really want to write each of the stories, because Hylas and Pyrrha and their animal companions, over the course of 5 books, are going to be having a different adventure in each book, but there's an overarching sort of story of how Hylas has to find his sister and defeat the warriors, this powerful warrior clan. And it's important to me to know where the story's going, to know where they're going. So in the second book, there are going to be volcanoes and a lion cub, as I said, and I've already done the research climbing an erupting volcano. And in the 4th book, as I said, they're going to ancient Egypt. So it's important to me to know where we're going in the story and how it finally ends. And I have to know things like who's going to die as well.
Well, I've got a question here from Germany, from Sabine, and apologies for what I'm about to say, but from Kurfürst Salentin School in Andernach. She says, would you like to watch a film version of your novel one day?
Would I like to watch a film version? That's a really good question, Sabine. Yes, if it's a good one. We've all seen bad films of books that we love, and I guess I'd be a difficult person to satisfy, because I have a very clear vision in my head of Hylas and Pyrrha and the animals. But if it was done well, yes, I think it would be amazing, because the great thing is filmmakers are artists in themselves, and they could possibly bring things to the stories that I haven't even thought of. So it would be lovely if it was a really well-made film. Lovely to see that. But quite difficult, I think, because of the animals. You know, how do you film from a dolphin's point of view? You know, that would be quite a challenge, but an interesting one, I think. Yeah.
We have another question from the theatre, please.
If you're writing, when you're writing, don't you ever get tired? Because I'm writing a book as well, but sometimes I get tired and I can't really write.
Yes, this is a very good question. This is a writer's question. Don't you ever get tired? Oh, all the time. I mean, anyone who thinks writing is just, yay, I'm looking forward to writing, I'm sitting down and it's fun. It's not like that at all, I'm afraid. I don't want to put you off, but it's hard work. And there are lots of times when I don't feel like it. And I know I've been saying, oh, look, I'm really keen to get back to writing. But I know that when I do, tomorrow morning I'll sit down at my desk and I'll look at this blank page because I haven't, you know, I've got a bit that I haven't really planned that well. And I'm going to look at it and think, oh no, what am I going to do? How do I tell this bit of the story? Because it's all very well knowing roughly what's going to happen, like, you know, Hylas and someone else is going to have a fight. Okay, but how do you tell the story? Do you actually tell it blow by blow? Or do you just say they fought and move on? Or do you tell it in flashback? You know, Hylas sitting, mopping his wounds. You know, all these decisions. There's a lot of decisions to make. So, yes, I do get tired. You have to force yourself sometimes. You have to sit there and say, no, I'm not allowed to go and make another cup of coffee. I have to sit there. But after a few hours, if it's really not working, then I would say, okay, get up and go for a walk. Because that often can help. So that's a writer's tip for you. Actually, moving around can really help. And I often find that when I do move around, go for a walk in the forest or something, it's not that the answer to how I'm going to write is going to help me, but what's really going to happen is that the question I should be asking myself usually pops into my head. You know, what's Hylas feeling in this particular scene? Or I haven't really dealt with the lion cub. Where's the lion cub? So that's why a walk can sometimes loosen things up. But yeah, it's hard work. But as I said, it's hard work, but it's worth it. When you have those moments when the story comes alive, then it's worth all the hard work. And when you finally see your book published and you talking to children who've read them and, you know, really enjoyed them and stayed up all night and got told off for reading them in bed at night, then it's the best thing in the world.
Thank you. Can we have another question from the audience, please? Gosh, lots of hands.
So, how did you start writing?
How did I start writing? Oh, a long time ago, decades ago. I wrote my first book when I was 5 on my mum's typewriter. Rather embarrassingly, she's kept it. It was a story, it was just a short story called Ebony the Mouse Goddess. And after that, when I was at school, when I was about your age, I was very bossy, and I used to make up plays and force my friends to act in them. So that I just enjoyed the process of telling stories and creating the world and controlling it. I could make anything happen at all. And at university, I thought for the first time, well, maybe I can make a living out of doing this. But it took a few years after that to really learn my craft, because it does take a long time. I don't want to put you off. As I said, it's one of the best things when it's going well, but it does take quite a long time.
Okay, I've got a question from the whole of Class 5 at St Gerard's Catholic Primary in Rotherham. And they say, who is your favourite author and why? Maybe we could have your favourite author when you were little and your favourite author now.
Well, I think my favourite author when I was little was an author called Roger Lancelin Green, who wrote retellings for children about the myths of ancient Greece and the Viking myths, and he did it brilliantly because he kept the sort of flavour of the different countries. Now, I'd be very hard put to just name one author, but if you told me I had to...
You do.
Well, okay, then J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings, partly because I just love that story, and partly because it helped me get into the myths and the sagas of the Vikings. And I love the way he writes. He uses simple words and he creates a picture in your mind, and that's what I try to do.
Okay, and final question. I think I know the answer to the first half, but the second half I'm not sure about. Lois in America says, did you enjoy history at school, and what's your favourite period?
I did love history at school, partly because I thought we had a fantastic history teacher called Mrs. Brown, and she was amazing. She really brought it alive. We actually weren't taught my favourite period at school, and you're right. I mean, my favourite period was prehistory. I loved the Stone Age and I loved the Bronze Age, before I even knew it was called the Bronze Age. I just loved the time when there were lots of animals, not that many people, and we don't know too much about it, so you could sort of imagine the adventures they had.
Well, so thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you all so much for all your fantastic questions and ideas. But that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. So thank you from all of us at Puffin Virtually Live, and I hope you'll be able to join us again for our next broadcast, which is on the 28th of November at 2 p.m. with Jeff Kinney, the author of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. But before we go, I know Michelle would like to say a word.
Yes, I just wanted to say a huge thanks to everyone for being with me today, and congratulations to the school who has won the class set of Gods and Warriors, and that school is Alfred Sutton Primary School. So well done to you, and I really hope that all of you enjoy Gods and Warriors. Goodbye.